Okay, identify however you want. The floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Breck Leash, and I am a recovering addict. First off, I just wanted to start off and say that I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to get up here and share my experience, strength, and hope with a group of people like yourself. So many people in the past have shared their stories when I was feeling hopeless and planted seeds in my recovery that helped me get to where I am today. If there's one thing that I want to convey, it's the sense of hopelessness that I felt in my addiction and that we do recover. That if I'm capable of recovering, so are you guys. Um, when I started off, I'll start off my story with my childhood. I grew up in a middle class family. I'm originally from Baltimore County, Maryland. I had a loving mom, I had a loving father, I had a great sister, I had childhood friends. I felt like life was great. Um, and then getting into high school is when I started to experience these problems that I felt like contributed to my disease, led me to drinking the way I did. And so for me, it was comparison. I was always comparing myself to the next person. And on the surface, I went to a private high school. I was very fortunate to go to. I was recruited to play ice hockey there. I was very excited to do that. And despite being on the varsity team for all 4 years, I was always comparing myself to the next best guy who's better at school than me, who's better at sports than I am. And so from the beginning, I had these feelings of inadequacy and I didn't know how to identify them. I just, I pushed that stuff down. At the time, I had a sister who was struggling um, with some mental health issues, and I kind of took on the golden child role in my family where I suppressed everything. I didn't want to tell anybody about what I was struggling with. I kept that all to myself. And so I think I was 16 years old when I picked up my first drink. I remember a buddy of mine went into my parents' liquor cabinet and pulled out some sort of liquor. And the second I had my first drink, it did something for me that it doesn't typically do for the average person. And I think that indicates that I had something going on within me that the average person doesn't. I had something going on inside where I was really struggling. And so when I picked up a drink, it really did something for me. And from that point on, my life was centered around alcohol. And it took a while for it to spiral to the point where I got help. But at first it was okay, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to socialize, I'm going to do all this. So that way on Friday night, I can drink. Everything became centered around the drink from an early age, 16, 17 years old. Um, so in high school, on the surface, I looked like I was doing okay. As I mentioned, I played sports, did fairly well there, did well academically, got into universities. And I remember my parents suggesting, "Hey, Brett, why don't you go play junior hockey? It's a great opportunity for you. We think you're a good enough player to continue playing." And I just remember saying, yeah, I don't want to do that. I didn't tell them why, but the reason why was I wanted to drink. And so I went to university. I went to Towson University. And instead of joining the hockey team, I joined a fraternity. I wanted to be around people who drank just like I did. And I remember thinking, man, I'm not, these guys are so bad. They drink every day. These guys have problems. I'm fine. I don't have a problem. Um, but realistically, I was struggling with something that I didn't want to voice. I was struggling with extreme anxiety. I was struggling with feelings of inadequacy, comparing myself to others. I didn't love myself. I didn't accept myself. And I masked that with a drink. Drinking did something for me that alleviated. It was a solution for my problem, a poor one, but it was a solution. And it was the only solution I knew at the time. And so as I was going through university, friends around me are using cocaine, they're using Adderall, they're using painkiller, they're using benzos. I remember picking up Adderall to try to perform in school. First time I took the pill, it was just like that drink. It alleviated something for me going on within, the suffering that I had going on within. And so I told my friends, "Oh, I need Adderall. I want it for school. I wanted to study for the next upcoming exam." But that was a lie. Realistically, I was taking Adderall to alleviate the suffering I had going on within me. Enough couple years of that, eventually I ended up joining the hockey team. And so at that time, I felt very connected. I felt like I had a lot of close bonds and close relationships. I had a fraternity where I was a treasurer of it, so I knew a lot of people that way. the hockey team. I thought I had close friends there. I had a girlfriend that I had been dating for several years. And so on the surface, I felt like everything was going right. I was getting the internships in finance that I wanted. I was studying finance at the time. Everything seemed like it was going right. I thought I had life figured out. And that was really just my ego telling me I had it all figured out when really it was a mask for my own struggles. And so friends have been doing cocaine around me for years. And eventually one of them says, "Hey, Brett, you like Adderall, right? If you like that, you're going to like cocaine." And so after 4 years of saying I will never pick up a hard drug like cocaine, eventually I caved in and I tried it. And from then on, just like alcohol, just like Adderall, I did it, and it did something for me that alleviated something for me that nothing else did. And so then my whole life, just like it did with alcohol in high school, where my whole life became centered around drinking, my life became centered around the next line of cocaine. And for a while that works. I was able to continue with school, continue with my relationships, but they were all starting to fade away. They're all starting to get worse and worse and deteriorate. And so as I graduated college, or as I was graduating college, I remember having going to a career fair, going up to all these different booths. And I remember going up to maybe 15 or so booths, and I had 15 interviews organized. And I remember thinking, man, I got it all figured out. Their life is so easy. And I had a friend tell me that too. He goes, "Brett, man, it sounds like you got it all figured out. You know what you want to do afterwards?" And that just, it fed into my ego. But deep down, I was really struggling and I didn't know how to tell anybody. I remember questioning, what's the strong thing to do? Is it to reach out for help? Or is it to just keep it inside and keep chugging along? Don't let anybody know. Don't show my weakness. And I think that's a story that's true for a lot of men and women in recovery, holding on to what we're struggling with and not getting it out. And so as I graduated college, fortunately, just as my problem was spiraling, I had a couple different jobs in the financial industry. I was working for a wealth management company, and then I got an offer in banking and started working in banking. But I kept this spiritual malady or suffering going on with me, and thus the problem of drinking, using cocaine and Adderall continued. And so I found myself being stressed out by deadlines. My relationships with coworkers were awful. My relationships at home weren't going well. My mom and dad were distanced from me. And I didn't know how to react. And so what do? I turned to the substance that was causing those issues in the first place. It's, for me, the insanity of this disease is that despite the consequences, I still return to using that substance, and then more problems ensue. So I started with going to happy hour after work with a couple coworkers. And then that leads to me contacting a dealer. Can I get Adderall? Can I get cocaine? Staying up all night instead of completing work, going home, and not being able to make it to work the next day, going to work hungover. And another thing I want to note is you've probably seen the progression of my usage. Not only did I start to drink more, not only did I start to use more Adderall and cocaine, but other elements started to come into it. The first time I took Adderall, something came over me, an urge to watch pornography. And that's something that progressed for me. When I watched stimulants, I started to binge watch porn. And that was something I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to address that issue ever throughout my recovery up until this most recent attempt. That's not something that I wanted to talk about. I was too ashamed. And so for me, I was being so weighed down by shame, by pity, by resentment, by comparison of others, by stress, by anxiety. I didn't know how to cope with the problems of the world. I turned to substances to try to cope with my problems, and those substances caused more problems in my life. And so I'm working at a financial company. I'm advising on decent sized deals, tens of millions of dollars. Yet I have psychosis from using drugs and alcohol. I think the government's spying on me because my thinking became so delusional because I used so many stimulants. And with that came a whole lot of shame. I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't know how to address it. And I remember one day, thank God, I didn't wake up for work, and my emergency contact was my dad. And so my dad and my mom came to my apartment to address the situation. This was the beginning, the first intervention in my life to seek help. And I remember my dad, a strong man who I looked up to, I'd never seen him really get emotional, and I'd never seen him cry. And he started weeping. He got on the floor and started weeping. He said, "I want my son back." And it was one of the most powerful moments that really began my recovery. And I'm so grateful that my parents have been there throughout all of this. And so to recap, I was a guy who thought I had it all figured out, who thought I was doing well in school. Look at me, I'm in college. I'm part of I'm on the club hockey team. I'm in a fraternity. I have job interviews. I got it all figured out. But realistically, I was struggling immensely on the inside. The drinking and the drugs are just a symptom of what I had going on. And so that kicked off the rest of my kicked off my recovery stints. I first went to an addiction treatment center in Maryland. I spent 90 days there, and ultimately I just wanted to do it my way. But along that journey, one of the last days at this treatment center, a peer support advocate, Dustin, shared his story. It was somebody I looked up to immensely. And it was somebody I saw all the qualities that he had, positive qualities and characteristics. Somebody I wanted to be like. And he shared his story, and I realized how hopeless he had gotten in his life, and that he's saying, I've recovered, and I recovered through a connection with a higher power. And that planted a seed for me that I had never, and my sense of hopelessness was slightly lifted on that day, that maybe it is possible for me to stop doing this. I tried working the steps a little bit, the 12-step program. As I said, I tried to do it my way. Turns out my version of the 12 steps don't work out too well. And so I ended up relapsing while I was in sober living, deceiving everybody, manipulating everybody, from my girlfriend, my mom, my dad, the recovery advocates at the sober living, all these people trying to help me, and I'm defying what they're trying. They're reaching their hand out for me, and I'm defying it. And ultimately, I end up on a plane to Florida. One day I'm in Maryland, next day I'm in Florida. Had no thoughts of it prior, and was at another recovery center. And so now my ego tells me, "Oh, I'm a college graduate with a good career, and I'm at my second rehab." All my friends, and this is where resentments start to kick up immensely. Resentments were really a huge problem for me in my recovery. I remember thinking of my friend who just got into Georgetown for grad school. I remember thinking of my friend who just got engaged, my friend who just got married, always comparing myself to other people, taking no appreciation or gratitude for the things that I had in life. And that's just it's a terrible place to be mentally. After going to the second treatment center, basically the same story as the first one, where I struggled right out of the treatment center. I went right back to using substances. I remember having 120 days of sobriety, and I was like, man, good for me. And at this time, I go to a job interview. I go through 3 or 4 rounds of interviewing at this company that I really wanted to work for. I get the job, I accept it, and they tell me, hey, we're going to do a drug test in a week or 2. And I hadn't relapsed yet, but I remember being so fearful of the stress and anxiety that was going to come with this job, and knowing that I hadn't truly recovered yet. And so I came up with this idea: instead of taking the job, why don't I go back out to drink? And so I remember telling myself, oh, I have 120 days. I can drink like a normal person now. It's the great obsession of every alcoholic, is to drink like a normal person. And that's a lot of my story, is trying to control it, trying to manage it. But ultimately I haven't been able to do that. And so that took me down a dark path. And I went from, having a beautiful girlfriend, close connections with friends, my mom, my dad, a career, all these things. And now I'm putting myself in a situation where I'm at the lowest level sober living in Florida, lowest level of accountability. So that way I could go out and use substances the way I wanted to. I tried to manipulate it, and that led me to going and staying in hotels and motels, so that way I could drink and use the way I wanted to. I was binge watching porn. I was trying to escape my suffering any way I knew how to. And that's the only way I knew how to. I remember driving back and forth from the hotel room to the liquor store. And the only thing that existed on planet Earth to me was myself, that liquor store, and that hotel room. And I have to say, that's probably the loneliest feeling I've ever had in my life. And that's the opposite of recovery for me, is that feeling of loneliness and despair right there. the big book says pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And I don't think there's a better phrase to summarize how demoralized I felt at that moment. I remember being in the hotel room, looking up at the ceiling, there was a hook, and I was wondering to myself, I wonder if that hook is connected to support beams, because I was thinking about hanging myself. I didn't think that there was any possibility for recovery. I didn't think I was capable of doing it. And so sitting in that hotel room, utterly hopeless, I get a call from my dad saying, "Brett, I'm coming down to Florida. We're driving back to Maryland, and we're gonna work this out." My sister fortunately reached out to a place in Utah, Spirit Mountain Recovery, and she said, "This place looks like it would be a perfect fit for you." I remember looking at the website, talked to the owner, and then after the phone call, I go, "Utah? I'm not going to Utah. I'm from the East Coast. What the hell is in Utah?" And I remember waking up the next morning, and by the grace of God, I don't know what happened, but I had a total change in mind, and I think that was an intervention there from a higher power. I woke up and said, "Man, that sounds like an amazing opportunity to go out to this place. It seems just up my alley." And so I ended up about 2 years ago flying out to Utah to go to Spirit Mountain Recovery. And my journey through Spirit Mountain Recovery has been absolutely incredible. I remember writing down in a journal 30 to 45-day program, and they were just trying to get me in the door. I was a sick and suffering individual, and I needed a lot of work. I remember sitting down with my therapist there, going on a rant spoke for about an hour and 15 minutes, just ranting for a session. And he hands me his notebook. He says, "Please read that out to me." I take a look at the notebook, and it says, "Educated surface level bullshit." And I read that out to him, and he goes, "You wasted my time. I thought this would be productive, but you wasted my time and your own time." And so my ego comes into play, and I start to burst out things that I thought were vulnerable. "Oh, I have a problem with porn. I don't like my self-image." And anyways, for me, that raw accountability, that kind of tough recovery was what I needed to push through my suffering. I was somebody who was very closed off. I could talk well, but I couldn't be vulnerable. I couldn't be honest. And so many people throughout my recovery journey have showed an example of what it means to be a recovered individual, to be honest, to be loving, to be compassionate. And I'm fortunate there was people at Spirit Mountain Recovery that were so compassionate that they were willing to lean into the uncomfortable to try to help me. And so I was a difficult case. I was told that they thought I had the worst anxiety disorder that they had ever seen. And I remember being in denial about that, saying, no, not me. That's not me. And so going through that process at Spirit Mountain, I ended up staying as a client for over 6 months. And as I was saying, every month I was thinking, where do I get a job? What do I do next? But yet they had the compassion to sit down with me and explain, you have a serious affliction, and this is our suggestion. Our suggestion is 1 year of recovery through this treatment center for somebody like you who has struggled so much, who your life is on the line. One thing that was really tough for me to realize is that I didn't know what was best for me. My best thinking got me into treatment. My best thinking led me to go to 3 treatment centers. It led me to hotel rooms, drinking alone. It led me to losing jobs and careers. It led me to burning down relationships. And so I came to some realizations while I was at Spirit Mountain that realized that I don't have this figured out. I realized that my ego had been driving my decision making, that my feelings of inadequacy led to selfishness and self-centeredness, doing everything for myself, thinking very little of other people, thinking all about myself. And it's funny, the more effort and thought I put into myself, the worse it is for me. The more I grip onto my job or to my loved ones, the worse it ends up being somehow. And so for me, my willpower was inadequate in keeping me sober. And through that process, I ended up deciding to get a sponsor, working the 12 steps. And I found that a connection to a higher power is ultimately what keeps me sober today. That, in addition to the fellowship of people that I've met in the recovery world. There's been so many people before me who have struggled with this and recovered and then gone out to share their story, to share their experience. And I'm so grateful because there's people who today I'm starting to reach out to them and say, hey, thank you. I know I haven't spoken to you in 4 or 5 years, but thank you for sharing your experience on that day, because it planted a seed for me that recovery is possible. And so for that, I'm forever grateful for the individuals, not just at Spirit Mountain, but the other treatment centers I went to, for people I've met in the rooms of 12-step meetings or refuge recovery or smart recovery, whatever it may be. So having gone through Spirit Mountain's program, I was fortunate enough that I kind of came to a breaking point where I was on my 4th step working through resentments, and I was like, I need to progress. What am I doing? I've been here several months. My life is on the line. When I use substances, I'm close to overdosing. I have thoughts of killing myself. I felt hopeless, and I said, okay, there's these people who said that there's a process that works. And so finally I threw in the towel and said, okay, my way is done. I'll listen to you. What do you have to tell me? And so one of the biggest pieces of my recovery is taking direction and leaning on people who know more than me. I remember the doctor there, he's probably went through 10 years of school to become a psychiatrist and has decades of experience working as a psychiatrist. And he wants to tell me which medication to go on. And I'm saying, oh, no, I know what's best. And that's just an example of where my ego was. And so I came to realize that my arrogance and my ego were preventing me from recovering, and that I had a whole lot of self-searching to do, and a whole lot of humility to gain in order to achieve recovery. And so I decided to work the 12 steps to the best of my ability to build a connection with a higher power. And through that process, I ended up being granted an internship at Spirit Mountain Recovery. They said that I had recovered from something and they wanted me to help guide others in their recoveries. And then through the internship, I moved on to be a peer support specialist and have taken on other responsibilities at Spirit Mountain. And I'm forever grateful for the vision that Chris and Matt Farney, the founders of Spirit Mountain, had. They put themselves out there to help me when nobody else was really willing to do it. They went above and beyond. And I think for me, that's what's so important for others in recovery, is somebody else reaching out to help. It's the unity and fellowship that helps keep us all sober. And so I'm forever grateful for the relationships that I've made through that process. I'm extremely grateful today to be able to empower others and guide other people in their recoveries. So today in recovery, coming up, God willing, next month will be 2 years sober. I'm very grateful for that. And today I get to wake up and have a sense of purpose, which is huge. I get to pray to a higher power, ask for guidance. I'm no longer running the show. I get to feel a sense of gratitude for the things I have in life. I don't have to compare myself to other people and put myself down. I don't have to wallow in self-pity. Instead, I get to love myself, accept myself. I've rebuilt relationships with my mom, my dad. My aunt and uncle recently came out to go skiing at Snow Basin. I built new hobbies such as skiing. I started to do old hobbies that I used to be into, hiking, playing ice hockey, going to the gym. My addiction took me to one of the loneliest places on earth, and my recovery has taken me to a place of connection that I didn't think was possible again. And when I think back at my lowest points, I was utterly hopeless. I didn't think recovery was possible. And so there's one thing I want to say, and that is recovery is possible and you can do it. And I'm forever grateful for everybody who showed me the way. And all I've done is simply take a little bit of advice and be willing to do it and try to practice honesty to the best of my ability. So for that, thank you.